Hello guys, welcome back to Love and Lies Asia, the channel where we share real stories about love, heartbreak, and betrayal in Southeast Asia. Today's story comes from Henry, a 59-year-old retired software engineer from California, who moved to the Philippines for a fresh start. For the narrator's safety, we've kept his real name, age, and other identifying details hidden in this story, as he specifically requested it. This is the story of trust misplaced and lessons learned the hard way. So buckle up because this one's going to hit different. Let's dive into the story. My name's Henry, and before we go any further, let me make one thing clear. I'm not here to cry about what happened. I'm here to share my story so someone out there can learn from my mistakes. If I can stop one person from making the same choices I did, then this will all be worth it. I'm a 59-year-old retired software engineer from sunny California. My life back in the States was what you'd call comfortable. I worked in tech for over 25 years, started at the bottom and worked my way up the ladder. I managed teams, handled big projects, and made good money. It wasn't always easy, but I liked my job, and I liked the life it gave me. But let's be honest. Years of working 9 to 5, dealing with deadlines and corporate politics, take their toll. By the time I hit my 40s, I was ready to throw in the towel. Add to that a divorce that left me feeling like a hollow shell, and it wasn't hard to decide that I needed a change. I had married late, in my early 40s, to a fiery Puerto Rican woman named Isabella. At first everything was perfect. She was passionate and intelligent and brought color to my otherwise monotonous life. But cracks started forming as the years went on. The major issue? Kids. She wanted a family and I didn't. It wasn't a secret. I had made it clear from the start that I wasn't interested in becoming a father. I thought she was on the same page, but as time passed, it became evident that she'd hoped I'd change my mind. When that didn't happen, the bickering began. At first, I brushed it off as normal marital spats, but her constant nagging about the what-ifs wore me down. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same topic, and with time I found myself losing the respect and love I'd once had for her. We tried to make it work, but love wasn't enough. The divorce was bitter, and though I walked away emotionally wrecked, that chapter of my life ended in ashes, and it left me yearning for a fresh start. I needed to escape the failed expectations and rediscover what life could offer outside the walls I'd built around myself. That's when I started looking at the Philippines. I heard a lot about the country. Plus, I figured it was far enough away from California to feel like a fresh start, but close enough to keep in touch with family and friends if I wanted to. So after wrapping up my life back home, I packed my bags and booked a one-way ticket to Angeles City. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't keep living the life I was living. I needed something different. In my first few weeks, I explored Angeles City a little bit. I sampled street food that was a far cry from the organic fare back home. The marketplace's hustle made me feel like a living organism. The nightlife was a revelation, from lively bars to intimate gatherings, each night offering something new. I was in a phase of exploration, not looking for anything serious, but enjoying the freedom of being in a new place. However, many months after the initial thrill began to wane, the solitude of being alone in a foreign city started to settle in. At 59, I found myself reflecting on the deeper aspects of this experience. The people, the way they lived through life with a sense of humor and grace despite life's challenges. I discovered that beauty in Angeles City wasn't just about the vibrant nightlife or the delicious food. It was also in the quiet moments, sipping coffee in a local cafe, sharing stories with a taxi driver, or watching the sunset over Angeles City. The city challenged me to confront my loneliness, while also inviting me to embrace the unexpected friendships and experiences that came my way. But the thing about being alone in a new place, it catches up with you. You can only keep yourself distracted for so long before the quiet creeps in. I missed having someone to talk to, someone to share my day with. It wasn't even about romance or intimacy. I just wanted company. And then God decided to answer my prayers. It was a Wednesday evening, nothing special. I was at this quiet bar near my condo, nursing a drink and watching the city move outside the window. The place wasn't packed, just a handful of people scattered around. She was a bar girl. Her name was Annalyn. I remember the first time I saw her. She was moving between tables, talking to customers with this effortless grace. She wasn't trying to be flashy or get attention. She was just doing her job. When she approached my table, Her smile caught me off guard. It wasn't the kind of smile you give because you have to. It felt real, warm. She greeted me and asked if I would like to talk and drink anything. I said yes. We started talking. Nothing heavy, just small talk. She told me her name was Annalyn. She was 28 and she worked at the bar as a bar girl to support her younger brother, 21 years old, and grandmother, 87 years old. She said her dad had passed away years ago and her mom wasn't in the picture anymore because she married a Mexican and left her homeland to start a new family. It was just the three of them, and she was doing her best to hold it all together. There was something about her that drew me in. Maybe it was her honesty, or maybe it was just nice to talk to someone who wasn't trying to sell me anything or invite me for a one-night stand. I found myself going back to the bar more often after that night. Annalyn and I started talking more, sharing bits and pieces of our lives. She'd tell me about her day, her dreams of starting a fashion boutique someday, as she believed her taste in clothes was impeccable, and the struggles of raising her younger brother. I'd tell her about California, my career, and my decision to move to the Philippines. It felt easy, natural. Before long, I asked her out. Nothing fancy, just dinner at a local restaurant. She hesitated at first, said she didn't want to mix work and personal life. But eventually she agreed. Dinner turned into drinks, drinks turned into laughter, and laughter turned into something more. And just like that, Annalyn and I started seeing each other. I wanted to share something about myself. Unlike the people my age, I had always been open to people's different job preferences, as long as it was their choice. So her being a bar girl wasn't an issue for me. I admired her independence, and the way she navigated her life, and I was willing to embrace her world, no matter how unconventional it might seem to others. Our relationship started like any other. Simple, effortless. I'd pick her up after her shifts at the bar or sometimes pay the bar fine, and we'd explore the city together. Angeles City is chaotic, but also has its charms. Annalyn knew all the spots. She'd take me to hole-in-the-wall eateries that served the best pancit and lechon and parks hidden away from the noise of the streets. She had this knack for making ordinary things feel extraordinary. She changed my perspective about bar girls. She was younger than me by over 2 decades, but somehow the gap didn't feel as wide as it should have. She made me feel young again. Annalyn was open about her life, or so I thought. She'd talk about her brother, her grandmother, and the struggles of making ends meet. She never asked for anything, but there was always worry in her eyes. As our relationship deepened, I started supporting her in small ways. I'd cover dinner when we went out, surprise her with gifts, and once in a while, help with her brother's college expenses. She never asked outright, but I could see the gratitude in her eyes when I offered. For me, it wasn't about the money. I'd saved enough from my years in tech to live comfortably, and helping her felt like the right thing to do. I told myself it was just temporary, but temporary has a way of stretching into something longer. She looked exhausted due to responsibilities, so I did what I thought any decent partner would do. I stepped in. I offered to cover the bills, not all of them, but enough to lighten her load. She resisted at first, saying it wasn't my problem to solve, but eventually she relented. Once the bills were paid, there was always something else. College fees for her brother, rent that was overdue, groceries that ran out before the end of the month. I didn't mind, or at least I told myself I didn't. Annalyn began leaning on me more and more. It wasn't just the financial support. She became emotionally dependent too. If I didn't call or text her, she'd accuse me of losing interest. If I worked late or went out with friends, she'd get upset. I brushed it off as insecurity, the result of her tough life. The first real red flag came about 6 months into our relationship. Annalyn asked me to meet her family, not just her brother and grandmother, but her extended family in their province. She said it was important that they needed to know about us if we were serious. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the trip turned out to be anything but normal. When we arrived in her province, I was greeted like royalty. Her family was all smiles. It felt genuine at first, but as the evening went on, I started noticing things. The way her uncle kept talking about his business plans and how he needed investors. The way her cousin kept hinting about the expensive school fees for her kids. The way her grandmother, the same woman I'd helped with medical bills, kept praising me for my generosity. It was subtle, but it was there. By the end of the trip, I felt like I'd been paraded around as some kind of cash cow. When I brought it up with Annalyn, she brushed it off, said I was overthinking things. I wanted to believe her, so I did. The cracks widened after the trip. I asked Annalyn to move in with me, and it went smoothly for some time. After that, Annalyn started making excuses to bring her family into our lives more often. Her brother, who was supposed to be focusing on his studies, began visiting almost every weekend. Annalyn's frequent visits to her grandmother's house and grandmother's thank you calls turned into frequent requests for minor things. A little money for medicines, a small amount for repairs in their home. It didn't seem like much at first. They were just little things, easy to brush off as part of helping a family you care about. But slowly I realized I was becoming their go-to solution for every problem. Annalyn's tone changed too. The once sweet and understanding woman who captivated me began to show a different side. If I hesitated to help, she'd guilt-trip me. "You're the only one I can rely on, sweetheart," she'd say, or "if you loved me, you wouldn't think twice about this." I hated how it made me feel, like I was failing her, like I wasn't doing enough, and so I kept giving in. The thing is, I wasn't blind to what was happening. Deep down, I knew I was being used, but I couldn't bring myself to confront her about it. But the financial strain was becoming noticeable. I wasn't broke, not yet, but I wasn't saving the way I used to. Every month more of my income went towards Annalyn and her family. The things I used to do for myself, traveling, hobbies, even simple night outs with friends became less frequent. I started feeling trapped. Soon her brother was constantly hanging around. And while I initially chalked it up to Filipino family values, it started to wear on me. He was always there. I'd catch him whispering in the kitchen or on the porch, and when I entered the room, they'd fall silent. One night I woke up to get a glass of water and saw a light under Annalyn's bedroom door. Quietly I peeked through the small gap. There she was, sitting cross-legged on the bed with her brother, talking in low voices. Their heads were close together, their body language casual, yet too comfortable for siblings. Something felt wrong, but I pushed the thought aside. Maybe they were discussing family matters, I told myself. Annalyn had always been emotional when it came to her family, and I didn't want to appear paranoid. The oddities didn't stop there. On more than one occasion, I found him leaving Annalyn's room early in the morning. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, saying they'd been talking late into the night and he'd fallen asleep there. My gut told me something else was going on. Weeks passed and my suspicions grew. Annalyn and her brother seemed to have a bond that went beyond familial affection. They had inside jokes, shared glances that excluded me, and once I even caught them holding hands briefly before pulling away when they noticed me watching. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overanalyzing because of past scars, but the nagging doubt stayed. Then came the tipping point. One day I came home earlier than expected from an errand. I heard laughter from the living room. It was Annalyn and her brother, and their laughter stopped abruptly when they noticed me. The brother got up quickly, muttering something about running errands and slipping out the door. Annalyn avoided my eyes, fiddling with the hem of her shirt. That moment, the doubts in my mind turned into something more concrete. I decided to confide in someone outside the situation. At a neighborhood barbecue, I met Marissa, the Filipina girlfriend of another expat. We started talking about life in the Philippines. Our conversation drifted to relationships, and I cautiously brought up Annalyn. Marissa's reaction was immediate, a slight stiffening, followed by a raised eyebrow. When she mentioned Annalyn, skepticism was evident from her voice. She warned me to be careful, saying some women weren't what they seemed. Her words hit me hard. Annalyn had a reputation, charming but with a darkness that could lead to heartbreak. I wanted to defend her, but I already had my doubts. She told me Annalyn had a reputation for targeting foreigners. The ailing grandmother I'd been hearing about didn't exist, and the brother was actually her ex-boyfriend. They'd scammed people before, playing the same roles. I felt angry and humiliated. Had I been so blind? Marissa advised me to dig deeper before confronting Annalyn, and I took her advice. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Annalyn's frequent outings, her whispered conversations with her brother, and the bank transactions I'd never questioned all came under scrutiny. I realized how little I truly knew about her. One evening, after telling Annalyn I was working late, I decided to follow her. With Marissa's help, I trail her to a dingy karaoke bar on the outskirts of town. I parked my car a safe distance away and slipped inside. There she was, dancing with her brother, laughing and swaying to the music. They looked more like lovers than siblings. Then I heard it. As I sat down, her brother leaned in close and said, "How much longer do you think we can milk this guy?" Annalyn laughed softly. "Not much. He's already showing signs of doubt. We'll get the money and move on." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Every instinct told me to storm out and confront them, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I knew confronting Annalyn and her brother in person would have been a disaster. They'd put on a dramatic show, spin the story, and likely turn the tables against me. I needed a plan, and I needed help. Marissa and my lawyer stepped in. Both advised me to keep my cool and quietly collect every shred of evidence I could. If Annalyn and her brother were really part of something bigger, as Marissa suspected, I had to tread carefully. This wasn't just a matter of exposing a couple of scammers. It was about dismantling an operation that had likely scammed countless people like me. So I played along. I acted as if nothing had changed, continuing to live under the same roof as Annalyn and her brother. Every day felt like a test of my patience, but I stayed focused. With the help of hidden cameras, recorded conversations, and screenshots of transactions, I began to piece together their network. The more I uncovered, the more sinister it all became. The family I had met months earlier wasn't just playing supporting roles. They were part of the scam. Annalyn's ailing grandmother, fake, her brother, her boyfriend, and not just a boyfriend, but a partner in crime. They weren't just running small-time cons. They were part of a larger group, a cult-like organization that trained women like Annalyn to target and exploit foreigners. My lawyer, who had started his own investigation, told me to be careful. "This isn't just a scam, Kevin. This is a well-oiled machine. They've been doing this for years, and they're good at it. You're lucky you caught on, but we need to move carefully." The word cult made my skin crawl. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, manipulation, and a systematic approach to ruining lives for profit. God only knew how many men they had already scammed or were currently scamming. Once I had enough evidence, my lawyer advised me to act quickly. With his legal assistance, we filed an official case and prepared for what was to come. As per his advice, we got a legal order to remove Annalyn and her brother from my house, ensuring I had protection from any immediate retaliation. Throwing them out was satisfying, but it wasn't without its drama. Annalyn screamed and cried. Her brother made threats that I'd regret this decision, and the fake family members showed up to plead and intimidate. Even the so-called grandmother showed up, sobbing and cursing me in what was probably a staged performance. They were confident they could break me, but I stood my ground with the support of the law on my side. The legal battle began. At first, Annalyn and her accomplices were cocky. They laughed off the allegations, called me a liar, and even staged more fake evidence to discredit me. Annalyn accused me of emotional abuse and financial manipulation. She claimed I had coerced her into staying with me by withholding money meant for my family. But as my lawyer presented the overwhelming proof we had gathered, recordings, transactions, and testimonies, their confidence began to shake. Annalyn's lawyer followed up by filing a claim to freeze my bank accounts, citing her ongoing police case as justification. She argued that the funds might be used to evade justice or coerce witnesses. My own lawyer warned me that contesting this would be a grueling process. While the freeze wasn't granted fully, a partial hold on some accounts was put into place, restricting my access to a significant portion of my savings. The threats started soon after. Anonymous texts and calls warned me to drop the case or face dire consequences. They told me to take whatever dignity I have left and leave the Philippines. My lawyer even received a letter laced with veiled threats. Marissa told me to be careful. She had heard cases where people who fought back against this group faced real danger. I started fearing for my life. Living in the Philippines no longer felt safe. My lawyer suggested that I consider leaving the country temporarily, while he continued to handle the case in my absence. At first I hesitated. After all, this was my fight. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. But staying meant risking more false accusations, more humiliation, and possibly jail time. I wasn't doing anyone any favors by staying and risking my safety. Before leaving, I made one last stop. I went to see my closest Filipino friend, Arturo, who had been a quiet but constant source of support throughout this ordeal. He told me something that stayed with me. Annalyn and her gang are like sharks here in the Philippines. They smell blood and they'll keep circling until there's nothing left. You gotta get out of the water, my friend. So I did. With my lawyer handling everything, I relocated to a nearby country and monitored the progress from there. It wasn't ideal, but it was necessary, and it worked. I flew back to my home country feeling like a totally different person. Totally different from what I'd been when I first arrived in the Philippines. The vibrant, adventurous spirit that I had brought with me here had gone, replaced by a bitter cynicism. But I wasn't done yet. From the safety of my home, I started gathering evidence, reaching out to contacts and preparing to fight back. I soon received an email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Stay away." The email contained a single sentence. "If you know what's good for you, drop the case." Attached was a photo of me taken during my last days in the Philippines. I was sitting in a cafe oblivious to the camera, and the sight of it sent a shiver down my spine. They were watching me. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, who advised me to report it to local authorities. But deep down I knew it was a warning. A reminder that Annalyn and her gang were still in control. For a moment I considered giving up. Was it worth the risk? Could I really win against people who had spent years perfecting their schemes? But then I thought about Arturo's words. You gotta get out of the water. I realized that walking away now would mean they'd win. Not just against me, but against anyone else they targeted in the future. So I pushed forward. I found and sent to my lawyers old messages from Annalyn that hinted at her true intentions, vague conversations about investments and opportunities that I had dismissed at the time. Annalyn and her gang had underestimated me. Back in my home country, the first few weeks were a blur of jet lag, sleepless nights and endless questions. Friends and family asked why I'd returned so suddenly, and I gave vague answers, not ready to relive the nightmare out loud. I spent hours pacing my apartment, replaying every moment, every decision, wondering how I could have been so blind. The trial dragged on for months, and I couldn't be there in person for most of it due to the threat to my safety. It was a long and exhausting process for my lawyer and I, but each update from my lawyer gave me a small sense of vindication. Finally, the verdict came. The court eventually ruled in my favor. Annalyn, her brother, and their accomplices were found guilty of fraud and conspiracy. While I couldn't bring down the entire operation, they were far too large and deeply rooted. I had at least exposed one of their cells. Court ordered Annalyn to pay restitution. It wasn't a perfect victory. The money would never fully cover what I'd lost, and there was no guarantee they'd actually pay. But it was something. More importantly, their reputation was shattered. The court ruling made their names public, and their ability to target others was severely diminished. It wasn't the ending I had imagined, but it was enough to give me closure. I sold my property in the Philippines and vowed never to return. It wasn't just about the trauma I had endured. It was about the realization that this group was bigger and more dangerous than I had imagined. Annalyn was just one small player in a massive game. But I wasn't done. While I couldn't dismantle the entire operation, I could use the power of the internet to warn others. I started sharing my story online, writing blogs, and joining forums to educate expats about the risks of falling for scams in the Philippines and other similar states where bargirl and gang culture is a norm. It wasn't much, but it was something. And while I can't save everyone, I take comfort in knowing that my experience might save at least one person from going through what I did. Now, years later, I look back at the time with both regret and gratitude. Regret for the mistakes I made, for the trust I gave so freely, but gratitude for the lessons I learned. Hard as they were, and utter gratitude to the people who stood by me, my family, friends, Marissa, and my lawyer. Without them fighting, those goons, would have been impossible, and I would have lost the case before it even started. To anyone listening, be careful. The world is full of people like Annalyn and the cult that manufactures vile products like her. People who see kindness and generosity as weakness to exploit. Never ever underestimate the power of greed. And I'm not one to judge someone's choice of work, but let me tell you, while you can take the girl out of the bar, you can never take the bar out of the bar girl. Well, folks, that was one shocking story. I don't know about you, but I'm still wrapping my head around the sheer audacity of the money-grabbing gang and Annalyn. Seriously, the level of deception here is just mind-blowing. It's a wake-up call for anyone looking to start a new chapter in a foreign land. Trust is a two-way street, but sadly, not everyone plays by the same rules. And let's give credit where it's due. Our guy fought back. So what do you think, guys? Was justice truly served? Have you ever heard or experienced something similar? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart, and keep your heart protected. See you soon.